Go, go, go. Get your tub water. Really wet in here.
Hey.
I think you caught me in an unfortunate circumstance. I forgot I was live. Oh my God. Well, you see how I usually walk around my house. How you doing, man? I'm sorry I missed you last week.
No, that was my bad. Sorry about that.
Oh, dude, no. What are you talking about? I totally dropped the ball. No, oh, right. Well, afterwards, right. First I dropped the ball, and then you were. Hey, it's all good. We're here now. So this is a Hangouts live thing, so it should be. I think it's recording. Let's see. Boom. Yeah, because it's going through my my YouTube channel, so hopefully we'll get a
Okay.
something
I
that
noticed
we
the
can keep
icons on
from
the
it.
left-hand side are different
Yeah,
here.
yeah. So it's not just straight up Hangout, which I've been. Oh yeah, that cool. There's the screen share buttons and stuff. Yeah, all right. So that'll be cool when I've got a few. Well, I've got an old PowerPoint and stuff too. I don't know if I'll throw that at you today, but there'll be some of that. So yeah, John, man, John, that was well, here's how it started. Well, actually, let me not just dive right on in, because once I get started, I probably won't stop. So if there's anything you wanted to get off your chest first, I give you a chance to go.
No, I'm just excited you wanted to skip right to John 3:16.
Okay, yeah, because it's well, it's like you said, it's central for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So, where did I write it? Yeah. So I was writing to my pastor, who I have social disagreements with.
Okay.
And and I'm super red pilled into well, the manosphere, as well as anarchy and all those other libertarian type things that you're probably at least somewhat familiar with.
Sure.
Through
Absolutely.
Tom Woods. And I don't know if you watched Mullenhour and Peterson and all those guys, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been reading a lot of Rollo Tomasi lately. If you haven't read The Rational Man, you definitely should. That's one hell of a red pill, the real red pill experience, man. And well, I won't go down that rabbit hole right now, but maybe we can talk about that at some point. I think there's some marriage saving stuff in there, and depending on who you married, but you may have some other foundational what would we say, well, a solid core and foundation already present that keeps the marriage together. And in my case, a lot of that, I was grown up. I was grown up. I think I was pretty broken for a very long time. And my wife definitely was, which so naturally we latched together. And so we're
Makes marriage fun, doesn't it?
Yes. And so you get to figure yourself out, and you get to figure your partner out, and it's, right. So there's a lot to go through, and well, that's what that's been all about. So it's good to have a little, well, not a little bit of masculinity, but a lot of masculinity defined for you, and feel really good about it, and see it work when you actually do things that are suggested in Tomasi's book. So that's been, well, one hell of a roller coaster ride lately, but it's also marriage saving. I'm really convinced. If assuming that, I mean, not it won't save every marriage, I don't think, but I think mine is definitely on the right path, rather where it was not.
Good.
And so
I'm
yeah,
really glad to hear that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah, I'm really happy about it too. So I'll leave that aside for now, and so let's talk about John. So I was talking with my pastor at the Methodist church down here, and he's not really progressive, but he's got enough feminism in him to drive me nuts. And talking about, I don't know if we talked about this last time or not, but he was talking about old movies, and those are not watchable anymore because there's too much creepy guy stuff in them. And anyways, and then he'll tell a story about a guy getting friend zoned in his teenage years and getting shut down, and then you wonder where all the feminism stuff went. So there's hope, I guess. Although he'd still frame all these problems in, what would we say, in a feminine context, as Oh, well, yeah, he's really stalking you. Well, no, he's not stalking you. He's like being a dumb teenager who is in lust and doing what's natural to him. So, well, whatever. But this is like old 80s stuff, and he's explaining to the younger people in the audience about what a corded phone with a rotary dial is and all that good stuff. But so I sent him my video on Parable of the Talents from Matthew,
Okay.
and got his response from that. And his take on it, my take on Parable of Talents is, well, you've got three guys that are given differing amounts of money by their boss or their master, and each according to his ability. It says so. It says that quite clearly in the scripture. And the top two guys go do what they're supposed to do with it, and when their master comes back, they say, "Well, here it is. I doubled it." And then the last guy takes his one talent, which is still a lot of money, if I understand what a talent is, and instead of investing it, he hides it and doesn't do anything with it, and gets massively chastised by the master.
Mhm.
Whereas the other guys get a nice, "Hey, good job, Pat. Keep that up. Here's some more responsibility. You did your job. You get more responsibility."
Right.
And you, guy, you said, well, you didn't. There's all this underlying potential in that story. That's, you didn't do what I asked. You came up with an excuse not to do what I asked. You were gainfully employed by me. You work for me. I trusted you with my resources, and what did you do in return? You decided to be untruthful and slanderous, and then finally confess at the end that I'm supposed to be okay with that. No, get out.
Right.
And yeah, and it's a pretty harsh message, which is really weird because Jesus is describing what the kingdom of heaven would look like.
Mm.
That doesn't sound like the perfect egalitarian society to me. and
Wait,
so
Jesus isn't a communist?
yeah, right. And so he gets really. Let me turn this fan on in here. We're roasting in hot humidity in Phoenix too. The monsoons are rolling in. It's that time of year. And we're cheap bastards with the air conditioning, but not with the cable bill. We pay for that internet. I make sure we do. Anyways,
point the fans at the router.
That's
point
right.
The fans.
Yes, don't melt the router by not spending money on the air conditioning, please. I can't believe my computer's lived this long. Anyway, yeah. So well, look, there's the reciprocity that's understood in there, and yeah, just because you're receiving less resources from your master is not a reason that you don't. It's not like he's not giving you a chance to prove yourself, and he's there to give you that chance, and maybe you should be grateful for that chance and try, not come up with excuses why you wouldn't want to work for him and be bitter about that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because it's I want to make it a voluntary relationship, of course, being the libertarian that I am. I don't know if that really applies to such an old message, but I think my understanding of it really is that, okay, the master wasn't doing anything wrong. He was acting good as far as God and Jesus goes, and why weren't you, servant, just because you're the servant? So I sent that to him, and he responded with his long sermon on it, because he'd had one written up. And I should really dig into it more to understand the progressive mind in a pastor, which would be a very interesting exploration. I should definitely look at it that way, instead of, well, if I look at it that way, then I'll understand it better rather than just looking for flaws, because that was the same problem that I did in when I was super atheistic and just look for reasons not to believe the Bible. So same kind of thing. So he sent me all that, and he said, "Well, I've kind of heard that same thing from what you said, but it seems that message comes from like rich churches that are justifying employers mistreating their employees." Really? And then he gives me this whole contextual trail to justify that position, and I have to admit that I haven't done the justice of digging through his argument and trying to steel man it, which is what I should do, is not straw man it, but steel man it, make it as strong as possible so that I can understand the position and then go to work attacking it. And because that's, well, one, respectful for him, and two, I might learn something from it, and three, he will, well, nobody wants to be misrepresented. You don't get to keep friends doing that. So anyway, so I was going to write him a reply to that. And so one of the things he said to me was, he said, "I'm sure you will see with me how easily," quote, because I think I had said I didn't have time to rehash my entire argument. I made the video about, it's been almost 2 months ago. Well, about a month ago, 6 weeks ago now. And so I said, "Well, okay, I get your side of things, and that definitely sounds at least deeper, more contextual from your line of reasoning." And I said, "Well, but couldn't it?" Because what I'm finding out about the Bible is, the more I read, is that these stories have multiple layers and there's multiple meanings, and some tend to be more true than others, and some are deeper than others. And but wouldn't you think that this version is true, which I just said, work hard and don't be resentful or fearful of the boss? And I think it's a pretty straightforward surface message, at least. And so he said, "I'm sure you can see with me how easily work hard and don't be resentful or fearful can become useful to unjust employers as they attempt to deal with rightfully disgruntled employees." Yeah, sure. I've heard this message in sermons at wealthy churches, which I thought was interesting, because he's directly said to me that he's there to fight fundamentalism.
Okay.
Which, okay, I can understand. What I think most people mean by that is they want to fight the corruption that exists in an extremist fundamentalist version of Christianity. At least that's what I hope that they're out to do, and not just, oh, well, let's tear down the foundations and put our progressive message in place. I'm sure there's some of that going on too, but I think one is justifiable and understandable and potentially noble, while the other is self-deceptive. So I replied to him. I said, "Yeah, I could see how that message could be easily abused. Fortunately, I'd say that this would be a very easy to spot corruption of what I see as one of the foundational psychological messages of Jesus. Jesus makes us whole by demonstrating exactly how to live our lives in a way that nurtures the spark of the divine we all seem to contain. And in other words, live like Jesus to the best of your ability, and good stuff is going to happen for you, at least psychologically, because I found that to be true the more I've dug into my subconscious and my own mind. And a lot of the things that I pull out of the Bible, especially having going through John, thank you again for the suggestion to have me skip forward again, to that point, because it's been very meaningful. Not that the other stuff wasn't meaningful, but this is maybe a little bit more on point, because it's easy to get bogged down in the old Hebrew stuff. Anyways, so that started me thinking, all right, so we grow to know God inside of us by following Jesus's example. So my theory is, or my feeling is, or my self-aggrandizement, if you wish, is the more we listen and pay attention to the world around us, don't ignore information, don't lie, especially to ourselves, and open our mind to the message of Jesus and whatever our conceptualization of God is, be it spirituality in general or some way that we're plugging into the world around us, because well, our right hemisphere is definitely geared for that, but it doesn't engage in this conscious storytelling that the left hemisphere does, which is what we tend to think of most of the time when we're, quote, thinking. And the closer we get to that, that version of God, well, we can do that through Jesus's teachings, and I found that to be very true. So John 3:16. So I wanted to go through and say, well, look, we know that this foundation of Christianity is very individualistic. It depends only on you. Once force is applied, it is a fundamental corruption. And so these are all inner searches to be like Christ, to be like the best human that we know of, or the best example that we know of through the Bible. So John 3:16, which I'm sure you know well and a lot better than I do. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. And of course, there's all this connection back to the Garden of Eden, but I wasn't going to quite take it that way, because, well, my understanding of the Garden of Eden story is original sin, and this does have a lot to do with our conceptualization of us all being viewed as sinners. So God sacrifices his capital S Son and expects us to do the same thing. We all birth children into a world that ultimately leads to death. You know that you at some point in your life, you're not going to have life anymore. You know that having children dooms them to the same fate. We do this willingly anytime we have kids. Now, I've talked and I've had online conversations with a guy that was very much into this message of his version of kindness. His version of kindness was the best way to be kind to his unborn children was to not have them.
Okay.
And I told him that was extremely nihilistic. No, that's not nihilistic. That's practical. No, that's nihilism, dude. There's no meaning. Life is, yeah, you got the message that life is suffering. I agree with that. That doesn't mean you get to choose for your unborn kids to not have them and say that that's okay and that you're doing a kindness to an entity that would never be. And so I got into that huge argument with him and trying to tell him, look, man, that's nihilistic to the core. That's game ending. And what I mean by that is, well, you can either live your life in a way that is going to make tomorrow better than today was, and hopefully make 10 years from now better than today was, and 100 years from now better than today was. Or you can live your life with no care for that, sacrifice nothing, realize that because you're going to die, you may as well enjoy the pleasures of life right now to the best of your ability and live as a free spirit and take your pleasures while you can, right? I think those are the two real fundamental choices of human existence, maybe. And it's exemplified in the Christian ethos very well. And I'm exploring that to the best of my ability. And that's what I'm getting at here. So God sacrifices his Son, just like we all do. We all have to sacrifice our sons and our children. We all birth children into a world that's ultimately, they're doomed to die just like we are. We do this willingly when we have children. They're sacrificed with no choice in the matter. They're born into the world. They don't get a choice. They don't get to pick who their parents are. They don't get to pick the circumstances that they're born into. It's suffering. Their choice is forced onto them because they were born. They don't get the choice to not be put up on the cross. And we're all in a way put up on the cross because we're all going to die. I mean, that's even the Son of God died. So you're born to sacrifice the world. Now you can either view yourself as a sacrifice, or you can reject that message and live in a very nihilistic fashion and just, entertain the biology of your body, basically. Drink, have as much sex as you can, watch porn, masturbate, all that stuff, right? Whatever you can to stimulate your nerve endings until you don't have any more nerve endings.
Mm-hmm.
Then why not? You're going to die anyways. Well, here's a reason not to do that. And the reason, my fundamental own core belief of not doing that is because denying that there's something more removes meaning from existence, and an empty, meaningless existence is extremely toxic to the human consciousness. We have to somehow deal with the fact that we know our fate and be okay with it. That's hard. And it's so hard that people commit suicide. They check out of the game. It's so hard that when suffering gets too bad, you get things like Columbine and kids deciding not only are they going to take themselves out of the game because this game is bullshit and it sucks and I'm hurting, but I'm also smarter than everybody else, so I'm doing them a big favor by taking them out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And without meaning, why not all of that?
Right.
In the game. That would be the ultimate reduction of suffering.
Dawkins doesn't really have a good answer to Columbine, is what you're saying.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you can't. I think a lot of really smart people are able to find meaning in helping the world because they feel that's the right moral thing to do, and they've come to that conclusion on their own. But I don't think that is a natural conclusion at all. Otherwise, you wouldn't see countries with the Christian ethos as some of the most successful, prosperous, and amazing places to live in the world. There's something foundational that's happening there, and I think that giving that message to people in a way that is understandable, but that's kind of my definition of transcendent. And I this is all, man, I've watched so much Jordan Peterson and all that I don't know what's mine and what's not, but at least this is my understanding of it right after reading this, that, and the other thing and trying to put it all together and have it make sense to me. But yeah, something that's transcendent is those ideas that you better not touch, or else God will come and really show you his wrath and create literal hells on earth. And we see it happen. And a lot of times it comes from very atheistic societies that don't have a transcendent ideal. Their transcendent ideal is crush the thing that we've defined as evil, and then the magic power of all humans and propensity to be good will be allowed to flourish because it's been held down by this, that, and the other thing that we've labeled as wrong. So that's kind of the roundabout way to get to, well, we need some meaning in a way that tells us, yeah, it's okay to have kids. No, you don't want to just chase your nerve endings and pleasure for all time. And not only that, you'll feel better crafting the world in that way by sacrificing than you will by ever doing any of those other things. At least I feel that way. I mean, when I got my stuff sorted, I feel more energized and more excited to be alive than I ever have before. And you know, I think part of it's having kids. You find more meaning in that. They provide extra meaning in your life. Yeah, big time. So and I think people back. I used to be so unappreciative of our ancestors that I wanted to be dismissive of their ideas because, hey, we've got science, and so now we can figure things out with the real toolkit, whatever that is, scientific method, and all the a posteriori logic that we have, which is based off of logic, reason, and evidence. But before that, what did we do? Well, we learned some things without the scientific method, and we learn them mostly by acting them out and by learning how to satisfy the conditions of our biology and still thrive and not be so damned miserable at the same time that we didn't see the point of doing it, even as we were conscious of our own fate. And if we didn't find ways to keep the game going, so to speak, then there wouldn't be a game and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. There would be no human race. So here's a reason why you have kids. God himself is going to show you this is what you're supposed to do. Yes, you sacrifice your children to the inevitable fate of death. And it's your job. And no, you don't have a choice. But it's damned glorious at the same time. How am I doing?
Well, I want to hear you out. So I mean,
okay.
I want you to keep going, but I've got an alternative reading that I'm.
Okay, sure. I mean,
I
definitely don't want to imply that this is the only reading. This is something that will appeal to the deepest, darkest atheist who is stuck in his nihilistic pit, I think, and give him a reason to believe in something that beyond his own ego. Because that was my problem. I'm smart. I can figure this stuff out. Why do I need this old book? Why? That's mystical. Look at all this stuff. What? You can't say, all the reasons in the world to disbelieve it. But it's true in a way that, well, for example, at some point I really need to read the Jeffersonian Bible, because he took out all the passages that referred to all the things that he considered to be miracles and mystical and didn't quite fit, and kept the moral message. And my initial instinct when I was an atheist, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of like that. And now I'm like, well, if you take the mysticism away, if you take the spirituality away, then you lose the transcendent power of the message. And that means it can be played with. And you don't want to touch the word of God.
No.
It's not your job.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's kind of where I'm coming from all that.
I'm with you on that.
All right. Okay. So you got made, you're going to die. You got no choice. How are you going to deal with all that? So one way to accept is you take all the pleasures in life, like we talked about, and your time under the sun is limited. Go enjoy it. Go, no concern for the future. You fail the marshmallow test, but who the fuck cares, because you're dead anyways. In the long run, we're all dead. Who said that? Kynes? Yeah. John Maynard Kynes, I think, said that. Or at least it's attributed to him. In the long run, we're all dead. Well, or another is to be more concerned with the construction of things in the future that you than you are with the pleasures that you're taking right now for yourself. But why bother when you're going to die and not see a whole lot of the results of your toils? And we're told that there's some sort of a salvation offered in this idea, right? Well, God loved the world so much that here's how you're going to be saved. And I think this is meant literally. Save your soul. Act this way. Your soul will be healed. You will build and be on the path of the correct orientation of the best human being that we know of. And you'll feel it. And you'll know it. Because it's true. So do it. And here's why you need to have faith. And because you're going to want to have all these reasons why you shouldn't believe, but here's the right thing to do. So quit ignoring what the right thing to do is. Because it's a really good thing and you really will be saved by it. Okay, so why bother when you're gonna die and you're not going to see any of the fruits of your toils? And this, I think, hyperlinks back to I think Abraham, when he's told that, look, your children are going to go populate the world, but you ain't going to see none of it. That's not for you. But at least you get to know that your children are going to be better off than you were. And you also got to deal with the fact that, guess what? They're going to suffer for 4 generations before they get the reward. And that's every reason in the world not to have kids right there. I'm not going to, wow, God, 4 generations of suffering and toil? Why would I do that to anybody else? You know, and, well, the message or at least of John 3:16 and forward is that, well, here's why. All right, and so there's some sort of salvation offered in the idea of actually sacrificing our children. God sacrificed his only child. He was willing to do it. He did it to save the world. We should do it to save the world. We have to do it in order to be like God. And this is why he created us in his image, because we're supposed to act like him to the best of our broken, sinful ability. So be willing to have children. Do it in spite of the fact that you know the world's hard, twisted, and broken. The time is never right to have kids, but you love the world so much, just as God did, that you're willing to have children anyways and sacrifice them to the future and to God. You're making a sacrifice by having kids, not only of your own time, but by condemning them to biological death. And so why? I'll do it out of love for what the world might turn into if we keep following God's path. And we don't know how. I mean, that would probably look like magic if we could see far enough into the future, because we're pretty good about crafting things as long as we don't tinker with the underlying structure too much too fast. Because obviously even things in the Bible are able to be changed, thus the New Testament over the Old. Thus, well, we don't necessarily need to have, well, maybe either my understanding of things in Leviticus is not sufficient, or we've just ignored a whole bunch of stuff in there. And we don't know exactly what the result of that is going to be. But hey, okay, well, maybe we don't need to have an actual physical temple where we're slaughtering animals and all that. Oh, maybe we do. But I think that's more of a conceptual idea of sacrifice and the ritualization of really important messages in order to protect them, in a sense. So you treat something with importance and you do certain things around them, even though you don't really quite understand the reasons, and that gives them reverence that makes them more important than anything else. And so a lot of the things that I at one point would have considered foolish or stupid may actually be there just for that reason or at least for one of the reasons would be to protect and ensure that the message gets transmitted forward through time to the next generation that has to learn this stuff all over again. All right, so then we get to 18. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. Well, what does that mean? Because that's quite a bunch. And so we're born into this world of inevitable death. Our fate lies mere decades in front of us. We're going to die. Belief in Jesus somehow frees us of that inevitable condemnation. Jesus is the Son. He represents all sons. We must believe in our sons and our children as we believe in Jesus. We have to, or else why would we ever have children? If we don't trust that they're going to do the right thing, then there's no point. Why bother birthing innocence into a world of pain, suffering, and death? Well, I think just this has been plugged into me now so much just from thinking about it that I probably said most of this. The answer seems to be because we have faith in our kids, and they will do all the hard work of building out into the future that we can't see. And there's no reason to believe this other than to have faith. Failure to believe means acceptance of the default condition. What would the default condition in verse 18 be? Well, it would be, you're already condemned. And so there's no salvation for you. So you're going to die, and what for? What the hell else do you have to do with your life is something that Peterson says already. Are you going to play some more video games? Well, okay. Good job. You crafted the World of Warcraft, but not not the world.
Right.
All right. So there's a naturally nihilistic nature to the world. And we're the first life forms to really understand that. All of biology for billions of years has been blind to its own death other than fear of it. I don't want to die because, and there, even before there were brains, it was just, well, jellyfish and whatnot acting out on their rudimentary nervous system and if the system of their replication didn't work, then it didn't work, and we don't have that species anymore. And eventually things got so complex through evolution that we came into being, and we're the first beings that really understand our fate and how brutal biology is. It's a real hard deal. I mean, to get where we are today, you have to go through 4 billion years of death, an unbelievable amount of death and suffering, and everything that once things evolved nervous systems in order to keep the game going for that form even longer and have that animal form or biological form be more successful than other things, then we get this concept of suffering in the world. And so animals just kind of act on instinctively to run away from pain to preserve themselves, which is why they live longer than anything else. But then we get us that really understands, is able to conceptualize the future and know that no matter what we do, we're going to die. Because, like a dog probably thinks it lives forever. We know we're not. So we keep having to deal with the very natural fact of the world that it's a nihilistic place to be. You're going to die, and what for? It takes a lot of faith to overcome the natural conditions of the world. Life's pointless. We're all going to die. Take your pleasures while it's too late. Have no, and if those are all true, why would you bother to be kind to anybody else? Why not just play the game of power? And because you don't care whether it goes forward into the future. And you're going to die. And you're only, this is what scares, I think this is what scared, I don't think I've heard Peterson articulate this, but he had a really deep-seated fear of nuclear holocaust. And why not? Because the people with the keys might have been playing the game of power in a way that was very nihilistic. And if they saw a reason or decided that their power was going to be done and this was all BS anyways, why not take the world out with them? Columbine style.
Mm.
And well, Henry, here I'm going to sidetrack a little bit and tell you about my friend Daisy.
Okay.
He's an interesting character and a good friend. We got to talking one day, and he's got, I mean, he's a really, really sharp guy. I mean, he's smart as all get out, and he's still in his 20s. So he has this nihilistic worldview, and I was kind of coming back on him about it. And I'm like, well, what are you here for? How do you find meaning if you realize that life's suffering and you're just kind of, enjoying it while you're here? And what was his answer? He was like, well, I get it. And I would never do anything that would inflict more suffering on the world, but I know that the natural conclusion would be to remove as much suffering from the world as possible. Therefore, we should remove us, which is a really scary thought for a very intelligent person to have. And then I find out he has a brother who is extremely autistic, and his brother is apparently makes Daisy's mind look like a gnat. He can't even, I mean, it's like orders of magnitude beyond what he can understand.
Okay.
And his brother is very disconnected from the world, like big time. Have you ever seen the movie Crumb?
No, I thought you were going to Rain Man, but
what's that? Oh, Rain Man.
Going...
No, yeah. Well, yeah. It's not the idiot savant kind of autism. He's still functional, but he is lost in his own mind, functional, because he is, to hear Daisy describe him, and Daisy's a guy, by the way, his real name's Jesse. He has, it sounds like he has an amazing ability to conceptualize and to maybe see things in not just perfectly in 3 dimensions and rotate the models in his mind. And so like his understanding of chemistry is like, it's almost like he's taking the stick and figure 3D models and he just knows naturally how it all goes together. And that's how he knows chemistry. He never read it in a textbook that was the best understanding I could get of him trying to explain his brother to me. So well, every once in a while, Daisy's brother will call Daisy up, and he'll say, well, I'm kind of stuck on this problem and help me out. And their relationship, well, Daisy's brother is so removed from the world that it's almost like even a guy as sharp as Daisy is just another tool to him, which is also a pretty scary thought, especially when you've got a mind as sharp as this guy. So this guy's up in a shed in Alaska somewhere. He's cooking up drugs. That's what he does. He knows it's time to cook more drugs when his power goes off. And apparently he's okay as long as he's got some problem for him to work on, right? He's almost like brain in the jar mode, right? Just really all the stimulus is up here. And I told Daisy, I'm like, man, that kind of scares me to death, because you need to keep an eye on your brother, because he knows what you know. He's even smarter than you. And he's going to, I'm like, well, what's his view of the world? He's like, oh, same as mine, but even more nihilistic, probably. And I'm like, yeah. So what's keeping him here? Why hasn't he checked out already? He hasn't committed suicide yet, but I think he will at some point. He's that kind of logical guy. When the amount of suffering in his life increases to the point where it's not worth putting up the suffering in order to entertain his brain problems or whatever he's working on, he'll check out.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned Crumb because as Daisy, I had just watched Crumb because it's something that Peterson recommended, and it's like the movie come to life. And I'm like, oh God, where's the camera crew? Is Morpheus about to come in and tell me, here, take this pill? It was that kind of moment.
Wow.
And because am I here having this conversation with you because you really need to keep an eye on your brother and make sure he doesn't? When was the last time you talked to your bro, dude? And get this, if he's that far removed from humanity where he can see us all as mere objects that are suffering, what would make him, and he's that smart, what would keep him from not making the logical choice for all of us dummies and creating the kindest, most simplest, easiest annihilation?
Hmm.
And wouldn't that be some kind of literal hell? And the idea of hell is actually, is connected with the pride of the human intellect, I think, in many ways. So that's, I'm fascinated by that story, because if I know that, and I'm really concerned about it, why am I not on a plane right now trying to find Daisy's brother and bring him in? So there's obviously something that I have faith in, where I don't really think that he's going to come to that conclusion.
Right.
Or I'm lying to myself. I sure hope it's not the latter. But yeah. Well, even in the movie Crumb, you get, so Crumb is the main character. There is the artists of Felix the Cat, I think, and was born into the exact same kind of family that Daisy and his brother were. And they had this alcoholic, abusive, power-driven father, a raging matriarch, controlling mom who completely loses almost any identity of herself as her boys grow beyond the rate. Well, I may be putting a little bit of my own embellishment on it, but she is a really rotten person, and she doesn't come across as rotten in the film at all. But the boys are not adjusted to the world at all, and the main character has just all kinds of weird quirks and fetishes and things like that. And his brother doesn't do anything except hang out in his room when is isolated from the rest of the world, and entertains his mind with philosophy or chemistry or whatever happens to be studying. I'm like, man, this is Daisy's family to a T. Well, and it was scary that the connections and parallels were so clear to between dysfunctional families. All right, well, that tangent done. Back to John. So, yeah. So if the scary thing about nihilism is when is the logical conclusion of well, if you really believe that the world is suffering, and you're smarter than everybody else, then you're going to do everybody the logical kindness of ending the game. No more life, no more humanity, no more being born into a world of suffering. And we see this acted out many times in mass shootings. Well, let's see. Let me just get reading here so I can actually get moving forward, because I get stuck on that thought. That kind of creeps me out. Have fun with no concern for the future, because you only have so much candle to burn. Never have kids, because that would just be cruelty to birth more life into the world where they don't even have a choice, and they're forced to come to the same conclusion that you did. And the greatest kindness to children would be to never have them, like this guy that I had been arguing with earlier. If you're interested in that, you can see it's one of my earlier videos with it's got Christ on there, and I'm like, well, this is nihilism, and I was just beginning to explore that topic,
Okay.
and I got all egotistical and decided to have a beer while I was doing it, and man, that turned into one of my last benders. Alcohol is a real problem for me. I like it way too much, so I have to be real careful with it. These are the dark thoughts we're all born with because we're all condemned, and Jesus is the answer to save us. The world will literally end if enough people become nihilistic. And as far as human consciousness goes, it's naturally nihilistic to a certain degree. And as we're going to be confronted, I think, in the near future with more intelligent people than we ever thought would be possible if we learn and understand the brain in a way that will make it modifiable. I don't think we're that far away from being able to maybe do like an entire standard deviation up the bell curve, at least from according to some neuroscientists that I've listened to, and shift the entire population up. That means a lot more smart people, and a lot more people that are going to be prideful, and a lot more people that are going to demand a reason to believe in something like Christianity, which is by its own nature a salvation. I think that's what I'm struggling with and trying to conceptualize. These are not just convenient messages to give to the people that can't understand why they should be good, but also wonderful psychological messages that have been crafted for thousands of years by our ancestors who figured it out the hard way by dying and seeing what worked. And I think when they figured it out, not only did they have to figure out, well, I don't think they understood quite why it worked, but they were like, well, whatever, go with it. And how do we protect that message the best we can and transmit it forward through time? Well, you put it in that transcendent position of God, and it feels like God too, because that's the way our brains are made to work. And whether you believe that we're made in the image of God or we made God in the image of us, I don't think it really matters. This is about as true as it gets. And I don't know what I believe anymore. I'm so confused. But I'm open to the answers now, and I wasn't before. All right, so we're all naturally nihilistic, born into a really horrible world of terrible suffering. And this is the condemnation that light is coming. This is the condemnation that light is come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For every one that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. And so we're all shown to have this inherent nature of sin. This is original sin. And why not? I mean, we're all blatantly nihilistic, and why not pursue our own pleasures for the hell of it? Our nature tends towards something that really could end the world and end the game. Well, the world might go on, but we won't be part of it anymore. And so we're born into sin, and we've got to learn how to aim true. And apparently some of the roots of sin are, in the linguistic sense, is to aim improperly. So if you're not sinning, then you are orienting yourself properly with the world. And so the message of Jesus is that in spite of our built-in love for this nihilistic and dark message, which is labeled as evil, we're actually capable of doing good through faith in God. And then this faith in God is defined as truth. Jesus is true. God is true. The truth shines the light on those who would continue to sin and ignore this message. And so doing evil by ignoring the message from God. So yeah, you're evil if you ignore this message, because you're making it harder for the rest of us to do what we've worked so hard to figure out was right and true. And so evildoers have to hide in the darkness. At least we suss them out. Now that we're aware of this message, God is literally shining, well, not literally, is shining. This message makes it hard for evil to hide because we can identify it now.
Mm-hmm.
You're acting in a nihilistic way. I label that as evil now. Let me tell you why you're doing wrong. I see that behavior. I'm like, we got to talk. Now, that is the exact reason why you want to spread the message of Christianity as far as possible. If you truly and completely, and I think this was sort of what I was struggling with the last time we talked, when I was like, I was trying to suss out this idea of good and evil, and I was starting to recognize nihilism as an evil, and the truth and speaking the truth and acting the truth as being good, and the truth is very well embodied in Christianity. So yeah, good Christians, knowing the truth, must spread Christianity to as far and as wide as possible, because they understand the difference between good and evil, and a lot of the people don't. So you can feel good about proselytizing because you're really saving the world. Literally.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So evildoers hide in darkness. At least we suss them out. The message from God, from Jesus, is the light which illuminates evil and makes evil visible, clearly visible, and makes evil more difficult to hide. So that's verse 19 and 20. And then 21, but he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God. And when I read that, I'm like, ooh, that's good. Yeah, because it's really, really true. So, we're told that we come into the light by doing the truth. Jesus shows us how to do that. We reveal all that we can. We don't hide anything. Hiding is a sin, because hiders are in the darkness, and the light is there for us all. So the more light we expose ourselves to by not lying, by acting out the truth, by not acting out lies, by telling the truth as much as we can, then the better the world is going to be, in a very literal sense. And this became clear to me as I was reading Rule 8 in Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, which is tell the truth or at least don't lie. And as I really started to take that to heart, amazing things started happening. And the more people I told it to, the more truth I told it to people, the more people went, oh, Jesus, that's really right. And I want to be around people that like you, that talk truth, and let me have some more of that, because that's been missing from my life. And I'm starting to surround myself more and more with people that like you, that are really into telling the truth and not hiding stuff, and let's get this stuff figured out. And then you find people with hard work, with a drive for and commitment for hard work, and then they're like, well, I always had this feeling that I wanted to work hard and I wanted to build something, and I want to, or at least this is definitely true for me, and I'm finding it reflected in a lot of people that I'm, especially new people that I'm meeting, that I decided to open up to. And so I have this drive to build and to do good, but I'm not sure what good is, and I'm not sure why, and then I come to this revelation of John 3:16, and oh, okay, well, here's the reason why this is truth. This is what we need to be spreading, and because it really is the way to improve yourself, be the best person that you can be. I'm going to sidetrack here a little bit, because I was told by a a high school buddy of mine that ended up being a pastor, and he runs a church in Texas somewhere now. I think his name was George Molina, and he was kind of watching my transformation on Facebook from rampant militant atheism to to what I am now, whatever the heck that is, and he's like, "Well, this is quite interesting, Carl, but I don't think that Christianity is, or belief in Jesus is, a self-help manual." And I'm like, "Well, okay, maybe it's the best self-help manual ever written, because I'll tell you what, it is it's like for me, it's like a weight off my shoulders. It's a reason to believe in something beyond myself. It breaks me out of my ego. It keeps me humble, even for a person as ravingly egotistical as myself, because I'm narcissistic and just I'm like I love looking at myself in the camera. There's a mirror in my bathroom behind me, and my wife will get to talking to me, and she's like, "What the hell are you looking at? Stop staring at yourself in the mirror." Like, man, it's a problem in me. And if I love myself too much, you can come to some really weird conclusions that are not good for everybody else.
Right.
It's important to find some humility. That's why humility is a virtue. And so, yeah, I took a little bit of issue for George calling my interpretation of Christianity as self-improving, because, well, of course, we wouldn't want to belittle it. And I think that's what he was really getting at. It's not... It may have that effect, and it may have the ability to improve your life, but if you make it that simple, then it's like what my friend Chris does with the whole, Jesus is the ultimate progressive politician, cheapening removing the transcendent, mystical, godlike nature from him, which, yeah, I'm still gonna have to go read some C.S. Lewis because of the... Like, man, Hitchens, what did you miss, dude? Because you were missing out on a lot. Yeah. All right, so that's almost the end of it, but let me read through what I had. So we come into the light by doing the truth, by speaking the truth. We reveal all that we can. We allow our actions to be seen. The actions that we naturally want to hide, we know that's kind of God living in us. We know what we want to hide. We know what's dishonest. We know what's not right. But we lie to ourselves all the time about that. And we justify, but then we really don't want anybody to know that we drank a quart of vodka last night, or whatever. That was my story.
Right.
Okay, so this makes our actions an extension of God's hand rather than evil, because now we're spreading more of the light as God intends us to, and we let the light shine through us. And more people that do that, the closer we get to the kingdom of heaven on earth. And so our actions, when performed fully in the light for all to see, are wrought of God. And I really love the line, wrought of God. That's our ability to let God work through us in the most fundamental, real way to craft the world. This is the way that God acts on the world, through us. Because he's removed his hand after creation, if you believe in the creation story literally, but still dwells inside of all of us in a way, and it's evident when we're truly aligned with him, because things keep getting better and better and better the more people act that way. If they allow really live up to what does Peterson say? You pick up your damn cross, you carry the heaviest burden that you can, and you don't bitch and complain about it, and then you get stronger and you can carry more, and you can be happy while you do it. And in fact, it creates the condition of happiness. We are created in a way to where our brains and our physiology rewards us with good feelings for building something, for moving forward, for being able to look at something that we crafted and went, yeah, I did good. And it feels really good. And it's better than anything that alcohol, or which is sort of like a shortcut to that same feeling. That they're all, as far as the brain chemistry goes, it's all dopamine, mostly. At least that's my understanding of it. So anyway, so I conclude with the more of us that accept this responsibility, the brighter the world becomes and the stronger God's presence in the world. And that's a really good thing. That's my story of John 3:16.
Okay.
So now again, I tend to take a very psychological and biological and I guess physical science orientation towards a lot of these things. But that's just because that's the way God made me, and I'm good with that. That's certainly not the only interpretation of this, but it looked like you had some things to say. So I let you say them, and I will be quiet.
Well, you mentioned some things that I think really tie into this intimately. And one of the things you mentioned early on is original sin.
Mhm.
And I think that that provides the context for why verse 16 means anything.
Mhm.
Um, for God so loved the world, and here let me back up. The guy
Mhm.
who's writing this, John,
Mhm.
claims in this book to be a personal acquaintance of Jesus. So he's writing this as someone who says, I walked around on this planet with this guy. Okay, so he's saying God, and he seems to be taking God as other, not one of us, not part of the creation, something outside of creation. And yet, I'm not sure how much John gets into this, but not not so much other that we can't be. I mean, the Bible says we are made in God's image, so there's some
Yeah.
connection there.
Right. Yeah. We're Him in some sort of really true and fundamental way.
So God loved the world so much that he sent his only begotten son. And it doesn't John doesn't go into the detail here, but the point is only begotten makes him of the same essence as God. So he's not a human being. God is sending God
Mhm.
to become one of us. And
Mhm.
that's the part that's not really fleshed out in verse 16, but he becomes a human being. John was walking around with someone who, he could
Potentially
have
was
reached out and
something divine, right?
he
Yeah.
could have shaken his hand, his poop stunk, all that kind of stuff.
Right. All the horrible
he,
physiology of a human being
he was one of us.
with God somehow living inside him.
Well,
Yeah.
God had taken human nature to himself so that I mean, going back to verse 16 here,
It's
so,
let
so
me
that
jump. Yeah, sorry. The thought I had was it's like the ultimate form of empathy. I'm this omniscience that you can't understand, but I'm going to step down and demonstrate how it's done and feel how it's done so that I can refine my message even better to you. Maybe something like that.
well, that, yeah, I think that's part of
So
it.
that's
He's
I'm probably completely missing what you want to
well,
say. Hang on just a second. My nose is like running, and I
oh
just
yeah,
got to
yeah.
grab a tissue. Be right back.
Okay.
All right, go for it. I'm all ears, and I'll
Okay.
try to realize that I have one mouth for a reason when I have two ears.
So he sent his only begotten son to take human nature to himself so that everyone who believes in him being the son, might not perish, but have a special kind of life, eternal life, not the kind of life that Adam and Eve had, not the kind of life that we know, but a new order of life. And I think that's key because I think that means that that's what Adam and Eve were designed for. But because they rebelled against God, they lost access to that. And in his justice, God probably should have said, you know what? Forget you.
Let's start all over
done.
again. Right? No more humans. You don't get any second chances. Make something new.
But thank God he doesn't operate only according to his justice. Here it says that he loved us so much that he sent his only begotten son to become one of us. It's not in opposition to his justice, but he fulfills his own justice, because when Jesus came and he died on the cross, he was taking on himself what you and I both deserve because of what Adam and Eve did.
Deserve, that's an interesting word.
That's tied in with justice, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you're right. You're just punishment for disobeying the ultimate authority.
Right.
No.
And that's why, I mean, I thought it was brilliant too that you brought up Abraham sacrificing his son, because what happens in that story really is an amazing picture of Jesus coming and taking our place. Because right as Abraham's about to plunge the knife into Isaac, God says, stop.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Don't do it.
You had to believe this far, but don't really do it.
If you look over there, I provided a ram who's stuck in the bushes.
Yeah.
I want you to take that ram and sacrifice that ram.
Right. And I think the story of Jesus is way more complete than that. I mean, in a way. What do I mean by that? Because here's God coming down and sacrificing himself and saying, no, I get it. You guys are all sinning, suffering, poor children. And I totally get it. And I'm going to feel that pain with you. It's like the ultimate empathy instead of, oh, let's put a ram in instead. No, I'm going to come down and, I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's really personal at that point.
Yeah, very personal. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I mean, the ram was just a picture. Jesus is the reality of that picture. And I guess the same thing goes for what you said about the whole temple and sacrificial system that we read about in Leviticus and other things. The same thing's going on, is that God is saying, look, you sinners have to deal with your sin, and I'm going to give you a Band-Aid to deal with that. And that's called taking a perfect animal and bringing it to me and sacrificing it. But all that's doing is pointing ahead to my own son, who's going to come and get on a cross to pay the ultimate price. I mean,
yeah, I don't know the Hebrew text enough to, I mean, because all that was supposedly prophesized, right? And the Jews that we're seeing in the Bible during this, as we read the stories of Jesus, are very skeptical of him being the real thing. And he's asked to prove himself over and over again, right?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And that comes out probably more in the book of John than in any of the other 4 gospels, where Jesus basically says, yeah, I'm that same God that your fathers wrote about in the Old Testament. And that made them so mad that they were willing to pick up stones to stone him to death.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm moved by the rest of this too. God didn't send Jesus into the world to condemn us,
Mm-hmm.
but to save us.
Yeah.
He wasn't here to give us. We already had the law.
Mm-hmm.
The law is built into who we are as creatures made in God's image. We know that we're not acting like God.
Right.
And God didn't send Jesus to say, you rotten, filthy people.
Let me punish you some more for what you're already doing.
I mean, yes, I think he appealed to that knowledge that's already in us. But the point is, he came in order to save us from the truth that knowledge is pointing to, which is that if we had to stand individually before God, we would stand condemned.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Jesus chose to stand condemned in our place, or to hang condemned in our place on the cross. Mm-hmm. Whoever believes in Jesus is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. And to me, this is so important, because that word believes, John is using in stark contrast to doing or to works. I'm actually preparing. I've been asked to preach at my church this coming Sunday, and the text that I have to work on is from a few chapters after this, in chapter 6.
Yeah.
And Jesus has fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish.
Right.
And they come back to him and they, hey, so Jesus, can we have some more food?
Right.
And actually, let me get to that passage, because it ties into what we're talking about here. Come on, work with me here. And Jesus said, you're looking for me not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Don't work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you.
Right.
For on him God has placed his seal of approval. And then they asked him, what must we do? See, they're focused on the doing. What must we do to do the works that God requires? And Jesus answered, the work of God is this, to believe in the one whom he has sent.
Yeah.
So the point, I think, is that, and this goes back to something the prophet Isaiah said in Isaiah 64:6, that even our best works, the ones that we can put a tuxedo and a bow tie on, are like filthy menstrual rags, if we literally translate the Hebrew there.
All right. Okay.
Those are our best works.
Yeah. But they're nothing compared to belief.
Well,
truly,
it's because of original sin. Original sin is tainting every single thing. It's because it's a condition that we're in before it's a thing that we do. So the works that the actions that we do flow out of the condition that we're in.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
The whole point is that Jesus came not only to die to pay the penalty for our sins, but his obedience, God counts as our own obedience. And so the point is, if we are trusting Jesus, God counts Jesus's obedience as if it's our own, and that's revolutionary.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I would take that. Well, I'm assuming that was where you wanted to pause. Sorry,
sure.
I got excited about it.
No, go ahead.
I thought I had. So yeah, I mean, I think part of the idea of original sin is fascinating, in that it is true, I think, because we are definitely born into a state of being desiring of our lizard brain in a very real biological sense. Then the construction of our brain is built off of that evolutionary framework, which means that we've still got lizards living inside of us in a real way. And that's kind of original sin, because we want to do what that lizard wants. I tell this to my son all the time. I'm like, yeah, would you keep your little lizard hands under control there? And because he's just touching and grabbing everything without respect for whether he should be touching and grabbing or not. And we do that when, if I see an advertisement for Coca-Cola, then I might get thirsty. If I see a liquor advertisement, I'm like, oh, drink could be okay. All that stuff that happens before you even think about it. Then you really have to exert the will of your conscious mind to overcome that natural reaction. I think that has something to do with original sin, as far as the biological perspective of it would be. Then, so what do we do with that? Well, if you really believe in your core in something infinitely good, like Jesus and the message that he provides, then it becomes so much easier, and the burden is lifted off of you to do the right thing naturally, instead of to do what the evil thing naturally. And that really lifts your original sin. You aren't burdened by that initial reaction of bad, something like that.
But I think that's part of the point of original sin, is that it drives the stake, like Dracula, through our ambition, through our pride. It's not something that we can grab our bootstraps and save ourselves from.
You didn't just get away from. Right. It's there all the time.
That's the whole point of verse 16.
Yeah.
If we could pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and act the right way, God wouldn't have had to send his son. He could have just sent another Moses with more tablets, and okay, that's what we're supposed to do.
Right. Oh, we get it now.
Right.
Well, I've seen a lot of heavy right-wing stuff, like the super, that's, oh God, Hitler was right stuff. That just really creeps me out. And I'm like, oh God, what's wrong with you guys? And they take it this way. I mean, they're like, well, see, the Jews killed Jesus, and then they take it off from there, and the Jews are everywhere in the world, and they're manipulating the world, and they're doing it because they're fundamentally evil or something like that. And I can see why they would believe that based on what you just said. There's the ego that is not checked, because Ashkenazi Jews are like the most intelligent. They're really almost a race unto themselves, people on the planet. And intelligent people will almost always be in positions of power. And if you don't have something to humble yourself before, and to really believe that that's above you. I mean, they believe in God, but their version of God doesn't include Jesus. So maybe, man, you could twist that in a really terrible way if you wanted to. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But it overlooks the fact that Jesus himself was, as Jewish as they come.
Right. Yeah.
And if you are going to hate Jews, then you have to hate Jesus, and
then
there goes Christianity.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Because, well, maybe every Jew is just a Christian in waiting. Who knows? I've got a really good, I can't do him this disservice, but I will speak the facts. With a good friend of mine that I grew up with from about college on, is Jewish, and he dropped all of the religion from his life, and he was one of the first guys that really got me going on theistic debates and watching the scientists crushing the theologians. And you've seen a billion of those, especially with Hitchens going around and to the Bible Belt. And I don't know why anybody agreed to debate him. Most of the time they were operating on two completely different spheres. And even when they crossed over, it was just, well, he was such a great debater that he would answer the question that he wanted to answer and not really address what he would do this a lot, and not address what was asked of him when they got to direct questioning back and forth. It was always had a whole book full of preloaded answers, and a lot of them are really, really convincing. And so that kind of got me on my own path towards being really militant atheist, because then I read, I watched Lawrence Krauss and Richard Dawkins had their little movie together, and in Loving Science as I do, I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like something that we ought to work on, because, well, here's the bad stuff about religion. It wasn't religion that was bad when I was looking at it. It was the corruption, the misuse of religion, the misapplication, the willful ignoring of what was good. And here's another way I define good versus evil. And it's, evil is pursuit of power for its own means, and that's on the nihilistic side. And then the good would be the opposite of that. It is actually listening to the spark of God that's within you, that thing we call the conscious, that most of us, almost all of us, have, except for extreme sociopaths and psychopaths. And knowing God through our own little Jiminy Cricket that we all seem to have. That's that spark of the divine, I think, that we all have inside of us. Well, anyways, when I got distracted by the Jew thing, that's what I thought about my buddy, and I was like, man, you ought to listen to some Jordan Peterson. And he was like, well, yeah, but I don't do the whole God thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's your turn to listen to me, because you're the one that got me on the whole militant atheist path. And to tell you the truth, it didn't do a damn thing for me. So, yeah, that's that story. So, well, what else did you got? So you were on verse 18, right?
Let's see. Go back.
Yeah, so Jesus isn't sent to condemn the world, and he's not coming with more laws.
Right. But if we are trusting Jesus, then what Jesus did counts in our place. That's that's the gospel in a nutshell. That's why faith and belief are so vital. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of the light because their deeds were evil. And yes, that's true, but I think it's also that they loved darkness because that darkness was part of who they were because of original sin. Yes, their deeds were evil, but those evil deeds were flowing out of, and I shouldn't say they, I mean,
well,
I have to include myself in that.
Right, yeah. Everyone has that dark potential within us. If there's one thing I would be angry at God about, is that I don't have infinite time. There's so much I want to learn and read about, but anyways, I wonder how much. I don't know how deep I want to go into Jung, but I know he's someone I want to read at some point. But I think I get plenty of them probably filtered through Peterson. I probably get enough of the right message. But yeah, he was very much about embracing the shadow self, not because you wanted to be your shadow, but because you needed to have a fundamental knowledge that you were capable of those things. And you're not good just because you're good, and you're not necessarily fundamentally good at all. And thus, original sin, you're actually quite evil and have the potential to do a lot of evil. And yeah, I'll say that again. It's true in the biological sense, because if you're just a lizard or an unthinking, unconscious animal, you're going to care only about yourself and whatever your biology tells you to do. I don't know. Maybe we're all just acting that out, but it doesn't feel that way. I think there's a reason for that.
Mm.
Maybe this is just the Matrix, but we'll never know. And I'll tell you what, it feels the best to, whether that's true or not, it is the right thing to do within the Matrix to play the game of the Matrix, to craft the Matrix forward as best forward as we can. So why not just forget about all that stuff, because we can't, in that case, Occam's razor is actually applicable. Whereas I used to, what would the phrase be? Well, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and you've got, claims of Jesus resurrecting from the dead, and what's that all about? It's going to be one to dig through, right?
Well, and that's a very important one. I'm glad you went there, because I was just going to say, in grad school, where I studied for the pastoral ministry, I was prepared to answer Hitchens with all kinds of amazingly sophisticated arguments. Like, sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had the chance to talk to Hitchens face to face, I would, because the Bible does, hang my hat on real time space history. I mean, the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 says, if Jesus didn't die on the cross, our hope is in vain. I mean, and I would just hold out. Look, if you can prove to me that a real guy named Jesus didn't die on a Roman cross outside of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, I give up, because it's not worth it if that didn't really happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hanging my hat on that happening, because I believe that my sins were thrown as far as the east is from the west from me because of what Jesus did 2,000 years ago. Go ahead, Hitchens, take your best shot.
And sorry, you had more.
Well, I just that it does no good to try to flee into some, I don't know, other realm of emotions or philosophical speculation or anything else. Let's put historical facts on the table and talk about what really happened in time space. Like, I'm saying I could really have cut my finger on a thorn from the cross that Jesus hung on. That's the kind of real time space history that I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's funny because I would always come across these. Well, was there a real Jesus, and then what's the nature of the historical Jesus? And there were a couple of books out there that would try to prove or disprove beyond a shadow of a doubt, and I never went down that path, because I guess I took the opposite side, where I didn't really care, or I never, or at least not enough to pursue it. Whether there was a real human named Jesus that was sacrificed on the cross, because the story is real and true enough, and faith in it, as you said, is fundamental and key. and really believing it in your core. So I never really worried about whether the physical thing of that happened. It seemed, for some reason, that seemed unimportant. Now that I'm, well, at least coming from Carl of July 30th, 2018, that seems so small. And this message is so large that I really don't care is putting it too lightly, but I don't think that there's a difference whether it happened for real or whether it was a story concocted, because it's true. I mean, it's true in the most fundamental sense of truth of it being our salvation.
So do you mind if I read from 1 Corinthians 15 for a minute?
Go for it. Enlighten me.
Now, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which I received, and on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you are saved, if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you. Otherwise you have believed in vain. For what I received I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, otherwise known as Peter, and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, and then to all of the apostles. And last of all, he appeared to me as to one abnormally born. Let's see. I'm going to skip down a little bit farther. But if it is preached that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? If there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. More than that, we are then found to be false witnesses about God, for we have testified about God that he raised Christ from the dead, but he did not raise him if in fact the dead are not raised. For if the dead are not raised, then Christ has not been raised either. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile. You are still in your sins.
That's a very interesting passage.
That's what I'm talking about when I say.
But yeah, no,
I hang my hat on the history of this.
Yeah, I mean, that being an historical event, what you'll always get when you take that as your, well, come at me, bro, stance, will be, well, now you're asking me to disprove something, and that's not how we play this game. And you don't want to do that with an empiricist, because now you're in his realm.
But
and I get it. You want that, the physical nature of it, and there it is, right there is in the Bible. Yeah, I'm gonna have to dig through that one a little bit, because for me the faith would be, well, I believe it happened. And okay, if it came to light that for sure it didn't happen, then yeah, I could look at that passage and go, oh, maybe I need to completely reevaluate. But there's too much other truth about our condition for that I would have faith in. That it's just like it's one historical event. I don't know. Well, but I haven't really gone deep into the whole resurrection thing yet. So I'm sure my opinions will change and grow as I study more. Yeah. So, well, I guess that's where I am on that right now.
Okay.
It's yeah. I mean,
I didn't
That
mean to
seems
come on.
counter. No. I mean, it just and I think it's good for us to do something other than nod our heads at each other all the time because we want to. As much as we enjoy each other's company, I think we want to be able to challenge each other's minds. Otherwise, we're just copies of each other, and I know God doesn't want us to just. There's a reason why He made us the way we are, and I think part of really, well, if right here in front of us, if we are speaking the truth, then we are shedding light, and we're doing good by whether we're disagreeing or not. But yeah, I don't think it's a huge thing to pull one way or the other on disagreement wise. It's for me, it's I guess what I'm struggling with is, man, let's keep faith in the realm of faith because that's what protects it. That's what keeps it holy. That's what makes it really beyond the realm of human egotism.
And I guess when I'm using the word faith, I'm talking about faith in an object, and in in this context, the object is Jesus Christ himself. And so to make an analogy out of it, he's like the life ring that has been tossed out, and I have thrown myself on him. If that can't save me, I'm done. I'm drowning.
Well, right. Yeah.
That's what I mean by faith.
Sure. And you've acted out your faith, right? In the very literal sense in how you've lived your life. So it's not just a bunch of words. It's living as best you can, as Jesus wants you to, as God wants you to.
I didn't mean to come on as come at me, bro. Not with that kind of an attitude.
Hey, if you were talking to Hitchens, you better, or a hardcore militant atheist, you better have your best faith armor on, because they're going to throw some nasty shit your way.
Absolutely.
I can guarantee. Yeah, no, that's what I meant. I didn't mean that you were being cocky or anything like that. No, so you're very humble.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Maybe too much so sometimes. Okay, I'll take all the ego onto myself. I got it. So yeah. Oh yeah. No, I like that. Thanks for sharing that. What else did you taking some other notes? I noticed you were scribbling pretty furiously. Had a scoop, which I do appreciate. I really, that shows me you're really listening.
Let's see. So on the tab next to my Google Hangout tab, I have a Bible online, but I've got my Greek text right in front of me that I was using as I was working on my sermon.
Yeah, man, Chris, I'm really gonna have to plug into you when I'm struggling with definitions, because the best I can do is, online King James and hope it's not too twisted in English.
Do you do okay with the King James?
Yeah, I was actually trying to answer that question for myself not too long ago, maybe just last week. I'm like, well, what version of the Bible do I really want to? Because when there was a verse that I was like, that doesn't strike me right. And so I was in Bible Hub just reading, because it's just what I had on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And flicking through, and I'm like, yeah, that translation, there's something wrong there. And I'm pretty sure it was still in Genesis or somewhere back there. And I'm like, well, there's something missing. I can't remember which verse I was looking at. But yeah, I found in whatever instance that was that the King James version rang most true, but that was just one instance. And well, here's a funny story. Since you mentioned that, it's I went to a yoga studio, and there's one of the owners. His name is Jeff, and I've revisited them recently as I've opened up more to spirituality. And Jeff's sessions were always ones that I had dodged a little bit. Like, man, I don't want him telling me parables and stuff. And my yoga session, I'm there for the workout. Not this was 8 years ago or so. I'm there for that. So I'm going to go to Aaron's session because he works my body hardcore, and I'm just falling over at the end. But Jeff has really deep knowledge of some of the Eastern texts and the Bhagavad Gita and I guess well, I don't know them well enough to even know their names by heart. But I asked him specifically this time around. I'm like, what did you read as you were? Well, I asked him for suggestions on spiritual readings, and he said, well, these two Eastern texts, which are, one was Buddhism and the other was Taoism, and I think and then the last thing he said was the New Testament. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, well, they all pretty much say the same thing. And I'm like, okay. Well, I'm gonna have to figure that one out. But he was like, don't read the new stuff. Go read King James. Okay. And I was like, okay. Well, again, if God would just give me infinite time, I'd tickle my brain forever. But I don't have all the time in the world.
If you do fine with it, I mean, I'm not.
What do you? Well, I mean, then so to answer my question with that, there was another one that came up. I was like, okay, well, King James is a little King Jamesy, and
slightly 17th century.
Yes, just a bit crusty. And what was it? I can't remember which one it was. Is it? I couldn't find it, or well, I have to look it up again. But it was another new English American Standard or something.
Okay,
like that.
Yeah, there are two that I mean, just because we don't talk the way that they talked in 1603 when the King James was written,
and they were basically, if my understanding of it is correct, that it was just, well, we're going to take King James and we're just going to remove the these and thous and the
in some cases, yes. But there are a couple of modern translations that I think are faithful to the original Greek and Hebrew, and yet render it in a way that we actually talk today.
Right.
So I would recommend either the New International Version or the English Standard Version. Both of those, I think, are.
Yeah, there was another one, and I wasn't sure if it was just the site putting in an extra letter in the acronym or not. I'll have to go back and look anyways. But
okay.
Yeah, but the site explained really well about the differences in translation. So there's one where the message was the object was to preserve whatever the message was. Well, then of course that's really subject to interpretation.
Right.
And then there's another one that's okay, word for word. Hebrew and Greek. And then there's another that's more like what I was saying with preserving the message, but it would be more like, well, okay, we're going to preserve meaning within this paragraph, which I think was also potentially very warping. So translation's hard. I mean, I know enough Japanese just to know that, man. God, the idioms will kill you.
Right. Yeah. Right. The message is known as a paraphrase, and so it's someone else's just. I mean, you're relying on someone else's distillation of what the text is actually saying. Whereas I would say the King James is very woodenly literal, and the New International Version and the English Standard Version are two examples of being faithful to what the Greek and the Hebrew are actually saying, but rendering it in a way that we actually speak in 2018.
And there's a new King James Version, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I am not particular at this point, anyways. So I'll probably stick mostly with with King James because I don't. Well, if I can read Shakespeare, I can probably handle King James. So there's the
Fair
ego.
enough.
So,
Hey, did you read the narrative that led up to verse 16? Jesus talking to Nicodemus.
yeah, I did. I did actually. Let me up, get one up here. It never loads the page the way I want to in Bible Hub. All right. Yeah, so let's see. Where are we starting? John what?
Chapter 3, verse
Jesus.
1.
Yeah, Jesus and Nicodemus. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, the ruler of the Jews. He came, the same came to Jesus by night and said unto him, Rabbi, we know that thou art a teacher come from God. For no man can do these miracles that thou dost, except God be with him. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto them, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Yeah, that's a very interesting phrase. Well, yeah. So what? That sort of refreshes my mind. Was there a passage you wanted me to look at?
Well, I think that leads off into an amazing discussion that leads up to verse 16, because 16. Nicodemus says, what are you talking about? How I can't climb back inside my mother and be born a second time.
Again. Right. Yeah. Right. And
Jesus
so,
says,
yeah, what does that mean to be born again? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's such a damn shame too, because that's mocked in our culture in a lot of ways. Oh, you're born again. Oh, you found God. Oh, that's so great for you. Eye roll. Yeah. You know, and it comes down to this vain contempt for and nihilistic egotism of, oh, so you need God in order to be told what to do. You need Jesus. Oh, I see. You're one of those, and you're actually weak. And oh man, you know, and I've been on the side of giving that, and I really hate myself for doing that, because I understand now in a way that I don't. Well, I hope that I can explain it a little in a way that some atheists will understand, if they're willing to understand. You know, there's oh wow, well, depending on how deep and late you want to go tonight, I went on a real ramble. Well, did you want to say something more to Nicodemus before I went on my other rant? If you have time. And
I was just going to take the other side of that one, having grown up in the church, and say, sometimes Christians do that to themselves and give off the attitude, well, I'm better than you because I'm born again.
Right.
And if you read that narrative, verses 1 through 15, it's exactly what you were talking about in terms of the child not having any choice about being born. Oh, okay. And if Jesus is telling the truth,
that idea, hadn't quite come to me, because that was really oh god, it's 1:30 and the air conditioning is not on, and oh shit, I can't go back to sleep, so I'll just let me read this email, and then it led into John 3:16, which is, I think, was, well, I had a lot of fun with it, that's for sure. Yeah, I'll have to reread that with my new understanding.
Okay.
Yeah. Jesus answered unto him, Art thou a master of Israel, and knowest not these things? Verily, verily, I say unto thee, we speak that we do know, and testify that we have seen, and ye receive not our witness. Yeah. If I have told you earthly things, and ye believe not. Now ye shall believe, if I tell you of heavenly things. And if no man hath ascended to heaven, but he that come down from heaven, even the Son of Man which is in heaven. That's quite a, well, I'm reading King James, so. And as Moses lifted up the serpent. Yeah, I remember this line. I was like, oh, wow, here we go, talking about snakes again. Yeah. Well, I don't have anything complete on that, unless you wanted to taint my, no, I shouldn't put it that way, to enlighten my mind.
Just that, I mean, what Jesus is talking about is something that Nicodemus can't bring about by exercising his will. He can't just screw up his determination and be born again. It's something that the Spirit of God does to him,
Right.
Much the same way a child is born.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Your child doesn't come out of your wife's womb and say, boy, I'm glad I really put my mind to that.
Mm-hmm. It just happens.
Right. It happens to the child. And I think there's a reason why Jesus uses that language,
right,
of being born again.
Yeah.
It's something that happens to us, not something that we do to ourselves.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to put it, because I'll try and reflect on my own experience. Definitely needing an answer to things like obvious nihilism and drinking too much and playing the nerve-ending game, living life for stimulus. Yeah, and it wasn't, well, they talk about this a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've been to quite a few meetings. I don't think I'm going to continue, because I've found, well, I found what they try to almost force through you, and they're starting to set off my bullshit detector in a way. And I hope that's not just my ego pushing back, because there's some things that I refuse to humble myself to in those meetings. But the good things that I pulled from it, and I tend to live my life this way regardless of where I was in my faith, was this sort of the jack of all trades, master of a few philosophy. I think that's what Scott Adams says in his book, or one of his books. And so, yeah, let me take the good stuff from that, and the good stuff from that, and the good stuff from that, and piecemeal it into my own philosophy and way of living. And so, well, anyways, I guess I've done that a little bit with AA, and there's so much about spiritual awakenings in there, and they don't, yeah, it's not something you can force. It's something you open yourself up to happening. And that requires not, it's so damn it, not counterintuitive. You can't force or try it. You can't have a spiritual awakening by making it happen, although you can do some things to make it easier to have it happen. And one of them, I think, is just really being open and meditating and reflecting on your life in a very open and honest way. And yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I've heard a lot of people share things like this. They'll share, well, I'm working my fourth step, and the fourth step is taking a serious moral inventory of ourselves, or I think something like that. And so when AA members are working with the sponsors, their sponsors that have been around in the program for a longer time, and the sponsors are telling them, okay, this is how you sit down and do this. There are a lot of the sponsors in it, and I've heard this from more than one. It's been women in particular that have, or at least it seems like the messages I'm remembering are from women, that they have trouble with the fourth step not because they want to ignore any of it. It's just that they feel guilty not remembering it all, or something like that, and so they're writing all the things that they've done wrong, right? And so it's just kind of like you're making your confession list and your list of amends,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, and so you'll be these. What I'll hear is the newer AA member will say, "Oh well, yeah, I was calling up my sponsor because I was like, well, I forgot to put this on the list. Is that okay?" And they're like really, really worried about doing it right. Um, and if they do it wrong, then they're not going to get the reward of being released from alcohol.
Oh.
And so, yeah, they're trying too damned hard.
It almost becomes like magic, like voodoo.
And you got to let go and not worry about it so much, because you can't just force it into being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's the right way to understand your mind or understand your connection to the spiritual or God, is to be very open. Yeah. So, well, that was what I thought of when you said about Nicodemus and being born again.
Mm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Not being able to try really hard and be born.
Right.
Yeah, doesn't work that way. You can try really hard by, I guess this is how I look at it, and how I'm able to, I guess, get really good ideas to write with and to make videos from. I flood myself with information, especially stuff that I'm really into and I really like learning, and so that I'm really engaged with it, and I don't bother with stuff that I feel like I have to force, usually, unless I will if I feel like I'm really going to get something out of it, and then I'll force the discipline on myself to read like something that's really hard, or maybe I don't agree with, because I'll still be really engaged because I'm either looking to pick it apart or whatever. And so I'm taking conscious study from lots of different disparate sources, and then I let go, and it's like waiting for God to tell you the answer to what you should really pay attention to. For, okay, you've got all this stuff, what do you do with it? And that's when I usually get my best ideas, after waking up, and I'm like, well, let me sit down, and now things are kind of calm, and just start writing and see what happens.
Mm.
And it's kind of like God talking to you. Yeah. So that's my take on that. So an openness is a way I like to think about it. Being open to the new experience and letting it happen, not forcing it to happen. Yeah, and yeah, I agree. The analogy of being born again is spot on. Yeah. The story of the angel stirring the water at the pools in Bethesda.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's taken as a right on dead miracle. I got to talking to another friend of mine who this circle of friends that keeps expanding as I tell the truth as much as I can and be as open as I can, and getting really good friends from it. We were talking about, what were we talking about? Oh, I can't remember what led us into this. It was a trippy day and night. We really ranged far and wide. So anyways, I got to thinking of this story, and I was probably getting on my little high horse about telling the truth and things like that, and the good that's come of it, and whether you're ready to do it or not, maybe. So that's a little off. Or I don't know. I guess I'm still refining that idea. And so there's this pool where people are getting healed, and there's a whole bunch of folk around it that are obviously sick. And every once in a while, an angel comes down and makes the water magical so that people get healed. That's my understanding of the story. And so the angel troubles the water, it says, and then whoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in was made whole of whatever disease that he had, which I think is a really interesting way to put it, because not all the translations use the word or the phrasing of being made whole. A lot of them are like healed or without. And then Jesus shows up in the story. He asks the inflicted man, and I think this is really an interesting part of it too. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 30 and 8 years. So it's not clear whether he was 30 and 8 years old and has been sick his entire life, or whether he's been sick for just that amount of time and he's older than that. And I kind of like the idea that he's 38 years old and he's been sick his whole life, because I don't think this is a story about curing leprosy. When Jesus saw him lie, he knew that he had been a long time in that case. He saith unto him, wilt thou be made whole? So Jesus asks him, are you ready for this? Are you sure? Because I can't help you if you're not ready, I think is the implied message. And he doesn't really magic him into health. He says, well, first of all, the impotent man says, well, sir, I have no man. There's no one, which means there's no one to help me. And when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I'm coming, someone gets in my way and gets there before me. Life kind of sucks, and that's unfair. And it strikes me as a little whiny, in all honesty. Like, I'm here and I'm waiting my turn, and I never get my turn, and it's everybody else gets the magic. And then when Jesus says, well, okay. Yeah, and it's interesting that Jesus asks him, well, are you ready to be made whole? And he doesn't get a real answer. He gets this whiny excuse. But then Jesus says, okay, well, ready or not, here I come. And but he doesn't say that. He says, well, here's what you need to do. Pick your stuff up and walk your ass into the pool, and stop whining about it. Well, he didn't say that, but that's kind of the interpretation that I'm getting in my mind. So the impotent man said, yeah, well, I don't have a man and I can't get in there. Jesus saying unto him, rise, take up thy bed and walk. You do the work. You get up and you move towards that pool. What do you think about that?
Well, except that the whole point was that he couldn't move himself, which is why he couldn't get into the pool.
Right. So right, yeah.
Okay, Jesus has done just better than the pool.
Right. Yeah, and he says, yeah, just hey, just get up. Okay, yeah. So screw the damn pool. Here you go. I got it.
Spoke you into health, right?
Yeah. And immediately the man was made whole, and took up his bed and walked. And then all manner of hell breaks loose. Because you did that on the Sabbath, and that's against the law.
Right.
Okay, so here you go. You get healed. And you don't need to go into the pool. Forget that magic stuff. All you got to do is what I say, and you're going to be made whole again, which I really do like that phraseology the best. Not healed, but made whole. Because you're made whole spiritually as well as physically. And maybe it was just something that you were ignoring. And maybe the answer was there all the time. Maybe you just needed somebody to believe in you. Oh, look, I can walk. Shit, I can walk all the time. What was I doing? Oh, I mean, there's so many. There's a lot of ways to read that, but I think they're all right to a certain degree. So yeah, take up your bed, and then, well, hey, you did it on the Sabbath, and the Jews said to the guy that got made whole, "It's a Sabbath. Quit carrying stuff. This is what you're worried about."
Right.
I can walk. What have you done for me lately? Um, so why am I worried about your law? Jesus showed me how to. Well, he did it for me, or I found it in myself, or I always had it in myself, and Jesus showed me the light. I was made whole through him, and you're going to complain and bitch about what day I did it on. Well, okay. So he answered them, "He that made me whole, the same said unto me that take up my bed and walk." And so even that's a really interesting phrase too, or interesting line. Then they asked him, "What man is it that said to thee, take up the bed and walk?" And he said, "Yeah." So it's like a certain bit of ingratitude. Um, well, he helped me out. He made it so that I could walk, but it's him. Don't look at me. Hey, leave me alone. And so he's not willing to be strong even after that, which is, I'm not sure what to make of that. But maybe if the point is, all right, well, it was, or maybe we could take it this way. When they asked him, "What man is it that said to thee, take up thy bed and walk?" And he that was healed wist not who it was, for Jesus had conveyed himself away. Yeah, so he looked around to be able to point at Jesus, and he couldn't. And because there was a multitude in that place, and so the literal sense would be that Jesus got lost in a crowd. And afterward, Jesus findeth him at the temple and said unto him, "Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come to thee." So, okay, yeah. So maybe it's something like this. Well, I made you whole, and I had to be smart enough to dodge the authorities because you weren't really going to be all that grateful to me, and you were ready to turn me in. You were casting blame off, and you kind of ratted me out. And so Jesus says, "Well, we got to talk." And says, "Hey, look, you've gotten this great gift. Stop sinning, because you're already on the road back to sitting by the pool. Least a worse thing come to thee. You got your second chance. You figured it out. Maybe this is some version of being born again. Least a worse thing come to thee." Yeah, well, you throw away your second chance. This is particularly true with alcohol. It comes raging back big time, and the AA guys will refer to the disease of alcoholism as a progressive disease that advances even while you're not drinking, because the next time you take up a drink, you're gonna really do something to screw you up if as that eventual bender takes hold of your life. So there's a little bit of that buried into it. Well, now that you're aware of what you're doing wrong, sort yourself out, buddy, because you may not get a third chance, and it could be so much worse that you're not going to be able to pick yourself up. And so the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus which had made him whole. And that's also interesting because, well, okay, it doesn't. He says, well, it's Jesus. After he receives the message of not sinning anymore. So now he's not like, well, beforehand he said the guy that healed me. He's not specific about it. He that made me whole. He went that away. And so now he gets questioned again after talking to Jesus, and Jesus going, no, look, come on, you've been shown something.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's time to be honest and to share that, because, well, if the definition of sin is not aiming correctly, well, you tell the truth and then you're not sinning. Maybe you weren't telling enough of the truth earlier. That was a little bit off the fly of what I was thinking, but I liked what I went off with Cam about was my new friend, was the idea of, are you really ready to receive the truth? And you can't go around forcing people to be whole. And then, even though the guy kind of whines about it, he pretty much delivers the messages. Yeah, I'm ready to be fixed. All right, so I think we'll quit at that. I'm at the point of just reading and rambling, but it's good stuff.
Yeah, I've enjoyed our discussion tonight, definitely.
I did too. Always like listening to myself. No, no, I definitely appreciate the insight that you give, and without you to bounce my ego off of, I don't know what I'd do. Yeah, let me. Well, tell me how the chance to preach goes.
Yeah. I will record it too if you're interested. So.
Yeah, I would be. Yeah, I would be. I'll leave you with this. I'm searching for my path, and I'm asking God what I should do next. And I'm trying to be as open as I can to receive that message.
Mm-hmm.
And I've narrowed it down to delving into psychotherapy, to also on the side crafting my webpage and my YouTube channel, and plugging in as best I can to affiliate marketing and making money off of that by offering services that are good. Of course, you know about that with Matt McWilliams.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good guy, by the way. I think if you ever get a chance to sign up for his stuff, that he's definitely worth it. There's a lot there. Takes a lot. You got to be ready to really dig into it. And I've been going through some issues with my wife that I had to sort through. And the main issue has been, look, honey, the next thing is going to be big and entrepreneurial, and it's coming from above. And I need her to be on board with that, because otherwise we'll be tugging at each other the entire time, and then it'll fail.
Mm.
Yeah, so I got to make sure that she's all the way on board, and she's good with me leading, even though we've gone through a couple of rough spots. And so the other things that I've been open to, there's a franchise that I may buy. It's education oriented, and the research that I've done from that has been mind opening, and that may lead me into the homeschooling thing, which I'm not really sure how I would do that, but that would be a really big project. I think maybe offering homeschooling services, especially in an encouraging way, where a lot of parents are kind of scared to do it because there's so much out there. And if I could make it visible and easy to see that it's really nothing to be scared of, and if you've got sharp kids and you don't want them in public schools anymore, then here, let me show you the way. And as I pondered more and really started to think about what does all that mean put together, for some reason I always struggled with this one the most. Maybe it's time to really think about finding, well, crafting my own church. Seriously thought about that. I don't know what that would look like. I think I got to do a lot more soul searching before I'm ready for that one. That may be the project after this one. I don't know. Got to ask God more for that one.
Yeah.
Not sure if I'm ready to take that one on, but I got a lot of studying to do for that in any case. But I enjoy it so much that, and it's such a good way to spend my time that it's definitely got to be something I'm really open to. It could happen. I don't know. I'm exploring a lot of different churches around and trying not to just sink into one. So at the very least, I'll be subjecting my subconscious to all the different messages of God as he sees to deliver them through his multitudes. And that's exciting. And there's so many churches around here. So many LDS churches, too.
Oh, yeah.
I struggle with that one.
Oh, I'm the right part of the world for that.
Well, that's right. I need to give the Mormons a chance. Well, all I have to do is flag one of the bicycle boys down there. Hey, guys, come on. Let me tell you my new understanding of God. Yeah.
If I recommended some Lutheran churches, would you be open to those?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, okay. As I was sarcastically observing, well, the last time I was in Texas, it was for my father's funeral. And sorry, not to put a depressive mood on it, but so because of that, I guess I was more open to seeing the churches that were around. And I'm like, ooh, the Lutherans are going to take over this part of the world. There's a church everywhere. Yeah, no, I definitely, there's a couple of Lutheran churches around.
Okay.
Is there any particular, I mean, they're not like chained together in any particular way, or there's, well, how specific are the different branches of Lutheranism?
So there is the Evangelical Lutheran Church, which I'm thinking is going to be more like the Methodist Church that you've been to. So I'm thinking more in terms of Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. LCMS is the acronym, or AALC, the American Association of Lutheran Churches, I think is what that one is.
Okay.
But those are good guys.
All right. Any ones to stay away from? There's corruption everywhere. I don't know.
You're right. You're right about that. But I guess what I'm saying is maybe skip the ELCA because you're just going to get more progressivism.
Oh, right. Yeah. And I wouldn't have ever thought to catch a progressive message from the Methodists. And maybe that's a false perception. I don't know. Or wrong expectation.
Maybe the church has, I know there are different flavors of Methodists too. So
yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure. Well, yeah. Here, the experience that I had there was from going multiple times was when Jonathan, who's the guy that I complained about, and he preaches a lot of good sermons that I do really enjoy. But he had some guest pastors come in that were, well, they didn't have any hints of any of that. So well, I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I will let God pick because I don't know what I landed closest to. So I may just go geographical at first, and then as I branch out, yeah, see how that goes. I know there's one just maybe 2 miles away, actually. Yeah, this is church country, man. It's good stuff. And scary in some ways. Oh man, I'll not to babble your ear off, but I guess you're used to it at this point. I went to a really progressive church and didn't quite know what I was walking into, and I'm like, well, you know, these guys are really, let me see what they do. And we had, you know, blue-haired minister gal, and not to belittle her faith or anything like that, but when you I'm not so sure that I want to. Well, if you wanted to get me as a member, you probably don't want to spend half of your sermon talking about the business side of things and the future of where you're going to be next time. I mean, isn't that something that you want to bring to your elders? And but they sang some pretty interesting songs. There's so many churches that I go to, and I don't know how I feel about this. I like going to the Methodist churches and singing old hymns, and I enjoy that a lot. Do the Lutherans sing older stuff?
Yeah,
good.
I'm sure you can find congregations that are willing to experiment, but I'm with you on that. Form and content go together, and I think it actually trivializes the content if you try to package it in.
Yeah, let's get this pop culture veneer.
Yeah,
I don't really like. If I'm gonna spend an hour or two of my week getting closer to God, let's treat it with a little bit of reverence and not.
There you go.
Hands in the air, yay!
Like we're at a football game. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This is not a tailgate party with Jesus and the apostles. Let's get serious about it, because it's some pretty serious stuff.
Yep.
Then, yeah, again, I think that's kind of the whole idea, is not to go have a fun experience, but to go have a reorienting experience, because we get all the rest of that stuff all week long. You can't run away from it everywhere else, and it's good to have a really rock solid message from God, I guess. Something serious.
Yeah.
Reverent, not lighthearted. Not that you can't be joyous, but I think there's a certain kind of joy that you want to pull out of going to church.
And some of those hymns really do express joy.
Oh, big time. I mean, I've cried and really felt things well up in me. And I don't get that from singing the pop culture new sermon. Well, not new. Well, you know what I mean. You've probably been to enough of those churches where big mega. I mean, it's like going to see Miley Cyrus or something. It just cheapens the experience, I think. And it's not what I'm there for.
Right.
Yeah, not what I'm there for. All right, well, I guess we better quit, or else we'll exhaust ourselves for next time. Although I'd go forever, I think. Yeah, almost. Until the biology gives out on me, right? But we got other things to do than. Well, here's my problem. I conceptualize too much, and I don't act enough in the world. And that's something I want to fix.
I see. Okay.
So it's time to figure out how to go build, get the real work done, not just play in my mind. I'm not Daisy's brother up in the shack in Alaska. All right, well, let's get out of here, Chris. Unless you want to lay some last-minute truth on me.
No, it's just been good talking to you tonight.
Very good. Always a pleasure, and I look forward to our next time.
All right. Sounds good, Carl.
All right. Good luck this Sunday.
Thanks.
Have a good one. Talk to you later.
Bye.